Hey, what's going on, guys? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today I'm going to show you how to set up the PSP emulator for Windows. This is PPSSPP. I'm going to show you how to download it, go through a few tweaks, and then show you the performance on my machine. Before we get started here, if you have an older machine, let's say older than 4th generation Intel with no graphics card, it's not going to run too well. I was able to achieve some really good frame rates and some stable gameplay with an older i3-4170, no video card except for the built-in Intel HD 4600 graphics. Now this machine I'm using right now is a lot beefier than that, and I'll be able to run pretty much any PSP game at full speed. So if you have an older PC, it might struggle a little bit, but I'll show you how to try to get around it. Let's go ahead and get started. First thing you're going to want to do is go to Google, go to PPSSPP.org, and we're going to download the emulator here. Downloads. So we're using the Windows version. I'm going to go ahead and grab the zip. You can also use the installer. This will install it as an application on the PC, but the zip will allow it to be portable. Next thing you're going to need are some games. Now I can't tell you where to get the games from, but these are what they look like. They are ISO files. If you download them, you will need to extract them with an extraction software like WinRAR or 7-zip. I'll leave links to both of those down below. Let's go ahead and unzip the PPSSPP emulator. We're just going to right click, 7-zip, extract to its own folder. Since we downloaded the zip version, we can place this anywhere on our PC and it will launch. Close this down. We'll get rid of that. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. So there are two versions in here. There's a 64-bit version and a 32-bit version. If you're on 32-bit operating system, use the first one. If you're on 64, use the second. We're going to run the PPSSPP windows.exe. Just going to go full screen window with it. Now from the top, there are a lot of options built in here. I'm going to go to Game Settings, Full Screen. That will full screen the whole emulator for us. We now need to navigate to where our games are located. I have mine on an external drive, which is G. More ROMs. Now these are going to be in a different spot than yours. Give it a second for all of these images to pop up. And these are the games I have. So right off the bat, you're going to want a controller. Now, any controller that's compatible with Windows will work. I'm using a Razer servo controller, but I usually always use my Xbox One controller. We're going to go to Settings, Controls, Control Mapping. Now this is very self-explanatory. The Xbox 360 is already set up. We're just going to set up our controller because some of these buttons are a little funky. I'm just going to go through. So if I click on D-pad and then press the up on my D-pad on my controller, it will map it. D-pad down, left, right, your O button, X button, square, triangle, so on and so on. This is our analog stick. Since the PSP only had one analog stick, I'm going to be using the left analog stick on my controller. Up, down, left, right. I find this very useful. Speed toggle, and I usually set this to a trigger button or my L3 button, which is you push down on your analog stick. And that's what I set it to. We'll click back. Now we're going to go into graphics. Now the backend I use is OpenGL. There are a few others. I find OpenGL works great on all of my systems. Vulkan is really good on some games, but it does not use buffered rendering, so some games are unplayable, like God of War Chains of Olympus. I suggest sticking with OpenGL for now. Frame skipping is another great feature. This will skip frames, but it will mess up a lot of games also. They'll be flashing in the background, and you really can't play the game because it's flashing so bad. Some games perform well with frame skipping on. I would test it with it off to start with. I leave my post-processing shader off. Full screen is checked. Rendering resolution. Now this is where it's going to take the most performance. So this machine here can use most games at 10x PSP. I'm setting mine to 5. If you run into trouble with a game not performing well, keep going down with it. This is going to be the biggest hit on performance for the PSP emulator. I leave VSync on. You can always turn this off. MIP mapping on, hardware transform, software skinning, all on. Here's a few extra speed ups here. Lazy texture caching. It doesn't help that much, but if you've gone to 1x PSP and you're still running very slow, go ahead and check these. Lazy texture caching, disable slower effects, and spline curves quality. This can also help, not by much, but it does. I'm going to leave mine on high. Filtering, 16x. My system can handle 16x. You may want to turn this off. This will also give you a big hit on performance. Show FPS counter. I leave both on. This will show me my FPS and the speed of the emulator itself up in the top right-hand corner when you're playing a game. One last thing here, lower resolution for effects. This will help out on lower end systems. Go to safe. I leave mine off. It seems to perform well. We're going to go back. Now that we have our controller set up, we have some settings mapped out. It's time to start a game. Now this is where you're going to be able to tell if you need to switch anything in the settings graphics menu. One of the hardest games to run is God of War Chains of Olympus, and the second hardest game is Midnight Club Dub Edition. I'm going to start God of War. Just click on it here. You can also use your controller to navigate the PSP emulator front end there. So up in the top left-hand corner and the top right-hand corner, I have my FPS listed. Go to New Game, and I'll skip the intro here, show you how this performs on this machine. So this is where you're really going to be able to tell if your PC can handle this emulator. Most newer machines should have no trouble at all. And like I was saying at the beginning, this machine that I'm on right now really does a great job with the PSP emulator. As you can see, continuously 60 FPS. You might see a little bit of dipping down to 55, but it's definitely not horrible and it's very playable. So I'm at 5x resolution with the PSP emulator. I'm going to press escape on my keyboard. I'm going to go to settings and I'm going to turn this up even more. So from 5x, I'm going to go all the way to 10x. So I believe I took a little bit of a hit on performance here. I also have my game capture running, which does utilize a lot of CPU power, but it seems to work pretty well at 10x. One game I cannot get to run at 10x even with my game capture off is Midnight Club. That's just a really hard game to emulate. We're going to back out of this game and I'll show you another game real quick. And like I was saying, you can use your controller to navigate. So I'll go to exit, games, and we're going to try Midnight Club 3. So earlier I did try this game at 10x and it wasn't performing this well. I was around 40 FPS. I'm actually surprised that it's working this well right now, but it seems to be handling it pretty good. This is one of the more notoriously hard to emulate games. This and God of War Chains of Olympus. So if you can run both of these, you pretty much got the entire PSP catalog covered with emulation. Another really cool game to play is Ratchet & Clank Size Matters for PSP. One of my favorite games of all time, or franchises, which is Ratchet & Clank. To be able to play it at a really high resolution, it just looks amazing. Definitely looks better than the PS2 versions of Ratchet & Clank. Oh, and I just missed it. So I want to back out of here. And that's pretty much it for now, guys. I really appreciate you watching. If you're running into trouble, definitely mess around with your settings. So you can try frame skipping, you can turn VSync off, rendering resolution, and your filtering. Try these speed hacks. If you've tried everything, then your PC just isn't powerful enough to run it. But like I was saying, most new PCs should have no trouble running all of these PSP games. Like always, thanks for watching.